nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired. Nobody trusts anybody now. There's nothing else I can do.
Hold up. My views are my own. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. You heard it here first. Lightning round. Dangerously close.
Welcome to My Views Are My Own monster movie mystery mashup, man. With me, your host, Doug McDonald. And today I am joined by a very, very special co-host. I'm telling you, this guy, he's the perfect co-host for an episode like this. He knows what it's like to be cold. He knows what it's like to be on an icy mountaintop, isolated. And I'll tell you, you can't kill this guy, man. He's like a real life McCready or a real life whatever Joel Edgerton's character's name was. It's not coming to me at the moment, but we'll get to it when the podcast moves further into the films. That's right. I'm joined by none other than Brandon Case. What's up, Brandon?
What's up, Doug?
Well, man, it's a monster movie mystery mashup, man.
Excellent.
I guess let's tell the people what we're getting into. This episode was inspired by the episode we did, The Shining versus Dr. Sleep. This is a little bit different because that was a very straightforward. Dr. Sleep is a sequel to The Shining. This is very different because The Thing 2011 is not, it's a prequel, but it's not even fully a prequel. It's a prequel / remake. I don't know why they didn't pick one way or another. So it's not an exact one for one of the last time we did something like this, but it's very similar. And much like how you've got your fans of Stanley Kubrick, you got your John Carpenter fans, man. It's a passionate group of people. All right, man. Let's start with a real quick. What the hell are these movies, dude? First up, we've got The Thing, 1982. Directed by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, several other people. Who else is? Oh, Keith David. I can't believe I forgot to say him before Wilford Brimley because he's kind of a bigger character in this. In a remote Antarctica, a group of American research scientists are disturbed at their base camp by a helicopter shooting at a sled dog. When they take the dog, it brutally attacks both human beings and canines in the camp, and they discover that the beast can assume the shape of its victims. A resourceful helicopter pilot, Kurt Russell, and the camp doctor, Richard Dysart, lead the camp crew in a desperate, gory battle against the vicious creature before it picks them all off one by one. That's a good description. And shit, let's just do a real quick overview of The Thing 2011, which is the prequel / remake. It's almost identical in so many ways. But now we're in the Norwegian camp. The original one is the Camp 31. It's an American outpost. This is the Norwegian outpost, which is, where the Thing comes from in the first movie. After Norwegian researchers discovered an alien ship buried in the ice, paleontologist Kate Lloyd, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, aka Ramona Flowers.
Hey, what's up?
Nothing.
Hey, you know Pac-Man?
I know of him.
Well, Pac-Man was originally called Puck-Man. They changed it because not because Pac-Man looks like a hockey puck. Pacu means flap your mouth, and that they were worried people would scratch out the P, turn it into an F, like.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Am I dreaming? I'll leave you alone forever now. Thanks.
As we all know from Scott Pilgrim versus the World, joins the team at the isolated Arctic outpost to investigate. She finds an organism that appears to have perished in the crash eons ago, but in fact is about to awake. Freed from its icy prison, the insidious life form goes on the attack. Paranoia spreads like wildfire among the crew as they fight to survive against a creature that assumes the shapes of its victims. And I'm sorry to the director of this film. This is a very Nordic name. I wonder if he even is perhaps Norwegian. Matthijs van Heijningen. What's your guess, man? Is that close?
You're braver than me. I have no idea how to pronounce that. It's a cool name, but that's a lot of consonants in a row.
It's like those Nordic names. They look really cool written on paper because it's there's so many J's and shit. Here's the spelling for everyone. It's but you know, it's not Matthias like you would expect. It's Matthijs. Matthijs Van Heijningen. Heijningen. Matthijs Heijningen. For the rest of the episode, he's Matthijs Heijningen. And so much apologies, especially to any Norwegian listeners. I'm sorry, I don't know much about your culture or how to pronounce your names. Starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and I'm telling you, man, I love this guy. Joel Edgerton as Sam Carter. Another actor I love so much in this, and another person whose name I don't know the pronunciation off the top of my head. Edwale Akinue, very famous to anyone who watched the HBO series Oz. He played Adebisi. Great actor, amazing actor. He really deserved a lot more lines in this movie. I would have preferred if he had a bigger role. And then, of course, one of my favorites is, and this is another Norwegian name, Christopher Hivju, who played Jonas. He's most remembered from Game of Thrones. He was the wildling that was desperately in love with Brienne of Tarth.
He was one of my favorite parts of Game of Thrones, those later seasons. Tormund.
Tormund. He was so great, and I loved like how pure his love for Brienne of Tarth was, because
right,
he wanted a powerful woman, you know, and she was the most powerful woman in all of the North, or even King's Landing. I mean, anywhere you go, she fought the Hound, dude.
She did. But yeah, no, I was super pleased when I saw him. I was anytime I see him anywhere, Tormund, I'm super happy.
Like I said, man, these movies are going head to head, dude. Same thing we did, Dr. Sleep versus The Shining. We're gonna say what we like, what we don't like, and at the end, both films are gonna get scored in the fairest way we possibly can. It's a four-tier scoring system. We score on action / in this particular instance, action and special effects are their own category together, because these are both kind of effects-driven movies, especially, of course, the 1982 film. It's what it's known for. Of course, acting is its own category. Plot is its own category. And then we have the category that's really just, you know, it's a personal experience, and that is wow factor. Who knows what's behind that door? Brandon, man, if you want to kick us off, dude, with first impressions, let's start with The Thing, 1982, man. First impressions.
Yeah, so my first impression, I love the cold open, which is kind of funny because it's an Arctic movie, but where you get this encapsulation of the story's driving factors, its plots and themes that come up right at the beginning. And so just as a brief recap, you have a dog running through the snow with a helicopter that's chasing it and shooting at it randomly. And, you know, the audience is left in complete confusion as to why this is possibly happening, and some sense of agitation, you know, because they're trying to shoot a dog, which makes very little sense. And then the helicopter comes in and lands at the base, and the dog runs into it, and the pilot's so focused on trying to kill the helicopter that he ends up like shooting one of the people at the base, but he clearly isn't like actually attacking them, but everybody's confused and frantic, and then ultimately they kill him. So you just get this real sense of confusion and real kind of incomprehensible violence and mistrust between different factions of humans, and also this kind of pervading emotional manipulation that comes from the Thing, especially as we move into the following scenes, and the dog's kind of like creeping around, and you can tell that something's a bit amiss, but it really kind of captures that whole feeling of isolation and confusion and violence and all of this stuff that's going to be repeated throughout the rest of the movie. So that left a very favorable first impression on me.
I guess, man, I'll start right where you did too, man. Opening scene, helicopter scene. This is the Norwegians. This is also in part of an explanation of how the other film we're discussing is not an exact prequel, because oh, by the way, guys, spoiler alerts throughout, and we will discuss the endings of the films as well. If you haven't seen The Thing, I highly suggest you watch it. It's a John Carpenter classic. And I highly suggest you watch. I mean, spoiler alert for what I have to say. And moving on, I highly suggest you watch The Thing 2011. I thought it was a really good prequel, but like I was saying, this is where the prequel breaks. The Norwegians that are chasing the dog in the helicopter. At the end of the prequel, there are no Norwegians left alive to do this. At that point, the only surviving person. What?
I think there was one survivor. If you watch the credits of the prequel, there was like one dude with a gun, and then a guy with a helicopter comes and lands, and the dude with the gun is like threatening the guy with the helicopter and forces him to like go up and chase the dog, and then they chase the dog into the US camp. It's in the credits.
There was a stinger in the credits. Okay, so I guess I didn't see the stinger.
Yeah.
Okay, well then never mind. That links everything perfectly. So erase everything I just said. I didn't see the stinger in the credits. I didn't realize that they make a connection and show why the prequel works. Damn. Right. Okay. Well, that's kind of a weird editing choice, I think.
It was a bit odd. There were some unusual choices.
I guess they were trying to go for that, like the end of Alien or Aliens with Ripley. Sigourney Weaver is always the lone survivor, and in this they were doing that, but with Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Right.
So
yeah.
So they gave us a real Alien ending. Like, oh, she's all alone in the cold, in the dark. Is she gonna die too? But right. All right, cool. All right, well that changes everything.
She's not in the stinger either, so which is kind of interesting.
One must assume that she succumbs to the elements. I mean, she's in Antarctica, a million miles from anywhere, and she flamethrowers the only remaining vehicle. The only what are those things called? Like a snow tractor?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a snow tractor, and the thing is in it. She lights it up with her flamethrower, and that's gone. Oh, but back to first impression. In so many ways, I do think it's a great opening scene. The great cold open. You're like, what the hell is going on? Why are they shooting at this dog? You get when they land, the Norwegian runs into their base camp with a rifle, and he's firing, and the cop, who I had called ACAB Andy Griffith, played by Donald Moffat. In the movie, his name's Gary, spelled with 2 R's, so you already know he's a piece of shit. And the reason I called him ACAB Andy Griffith is because he wears the exact same uniform as Andy Griffith from the Andy Griffith Show and has other similar features, but he also seems like the kind of cop that would shoot your dog, like just itchy trigger finger.
Put that down. No, I'll put this right through your head. You guys gonna listen to Gary? You gonna let him give the orders? I mean, he could be one of those things.
It's actually, I think later on it really lends to the movie, because you immediately build a strong distrust for this guy. Like he just seems like he shouldn't have a gun. He seems like he lies a lot. We'll get to it later on in the criticism section. There is one part of the opening scene that I didn't like, and that's a Foley effects. I understand, but I wish they had just tried a little bit harder with how they did the rifle and the gunshots. They weren't matched up, so the gunshot Foley effect wasn't linked quite well enough to the rifle, and the rifle didn't have a muzzle flash or a recoil or anything. So it was one of those things that I couldn't ignore, that how unrealistic it seemed that he was firing the rifle. It looked like he was just holding a rifle, and you would occasionally hear a gunshot, and you would just have to use your imagination to put those two together. That I don't want to come out of the gate just sitting here attacking the opening scene, but that is my first impression. Was I did not appreciate that one mistake they made. Well, let's move on over to first impressions. The Thing, 2011.
Yeah, so that one I think also did a fairly good job of encapsulating what it was trying to be as a movie, which felt much more like an action film or like a disaster film. It kind of had a vibe similar to Day After Tomorrow, I don't know if you watched that one with Jake Gyllenhaal from like forever ago.
I saw that movie in theaters in Washington D.C. and I just want to share this one moment because it was so cool. It was I went and saw the movie by myself, which is not always a boring thing to do. Sometimes it's actually fun to do that.
I usually go to the movies by myself, actually.
I was it was the theater at Union Station in Washington D.C. I had some time and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go watch this. I get in there, very rowdy audience, which I thought was fun because it wasn't like, you know, a movie that I cared that much about. So the rowdy audience really in every single way was just improving every aspect of the film. And the scene where I think there's like a glacier like crossing America and all the Americans are trying to get into Mexico, but Mexico has like mobilized the military and put up a wall and they're not letting Americans into Mexico. And the audience stood up in the middle of the movie and gave a standing ovation to that scene. It was hilarious. Every single person was up in there clapping, screaming, cheering, and you know, because it was a beautiful turnabout.
Yeah.
Shit, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So it felt a little bit more like that, more actiony, more rompy, a little bit more disastery. And so you open with a group of scientists that are at one of these Antarctic research stations, and they're traversing, the snow, and they're homing in or find a signal that's beneath the snow, which in the novella, it was kind of cool because they discuss this in the novella, but it doesn't really make its way into John Carpenter's 1982 one, where they find like a gravitational anomaly or some sort of signal in the snow in this one, and so they're like trying to find it, and then the whole like ice like pack like splits, and then the snowcat actually like nosedives down into the crack, which presumably the big alien spaceship is like directly down in there. And so you get this kind of like dramatic like interplay between the kind of like slightly body humor that's going on, and then this and searching for this thing, and then like falling into this big like cracking action scene. So I thought that it did a pretty good job of describing what the movie was going for as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to start basically with the same thing with like what you did, opening scene. Also very cool opening scene, and I think what both films were trying to do was, you're in Antarctica. I don't know where these were actually filmed, probably somewhere in Canada, in the tundra, or who knows, Alaska maybe. But the idea is to make you understand how freezing cold these places are and how isolated they are, because that's the tone and the mood they're going for. And that's one of the things I thought was really good about the prequel, is how true to the original film they would stay with so much of everything. I mean, really, like they really do hit it on the nail on the head so much with keeping it true to the original story and true to the original concept. But yeah, opening scene, they're in a big snow terrain vehicle. It's kind of like basically like a big van with tractor treads. In the front, there's two Norwegian guys with beards, telling a dirty joke. I mean, actually a filthy joke to tell. and in the back, there's the nerdy tech guy who's trying. He's like, I found a signal. We got to go check the signal. So these guys have gone away from their research station to go find this signal. They hit a crack in the ground in Antarctica, which are not uncommon. That's actually the way people die in Antarctica oftentimes, because they're so hard to see with the blinding whiteness of the snow. They fall into the chasm. Fortunately, the size of the vehicle pins them, and they're stuck there. I loved it. I thought it was a great opening scene, man. It was just really fun. Got the tone set. And one of the things I want to bring this up just a little bit. It goes back to the original as well, is that I thought that John Carpenter in a lot of ways was trying to bring a Lovecraftian feel to the movie. And I feel like that's why the monsters are very H.P. Lovecraft in like stylistically. And I felt like this movie is a little bit, it's funny because I thought this movie was a little bit more along the lines of a Resident Evil movie, a little more
Mhm.
tech, more streamlined, more kind of trying to be visually like that. And I learned some more about this director, Matthijs. He had more of a career in doing like commercials and music videos, so he's
Mhm.
more used to making sleek looking shit. And yeah, so that had more of a Resident Evil vibe to me. And then I went on to learn that the guy that did the score to the 2011 film is the same guy. He did the score to Resident Evil, which I thought was a fantastic score. But yeah, so like I just thought that was an interesting thing, that without me even knowing that the composer that did the score to Resident Evil, I was already feeling that there was a very Resident Evil vibe to this. I actually thought the monsters were very Resident Evil. So
Yeah, I can see that a lot actually, and it does have a very interesting tone. And you brought up the Lovecraftian kind of feel to John Carpenter's. The original novella that it's based on was written in that same kind of science fiction era in like the early 20th century, and so that was definitely kind of the pervading feel in the novella. Is you get this like extreme claustrophobia, and the thing is really it's a thing. It's something that we can't understand, and is super smart and like really doing a great job of screwing with these humans in its attempt to survive. So I think that was a really good parallel, and definitely comes from the original time that it was written, which was ages ago.
and I mean, just one last thing on the Lovecraftian aspect of some of this is that the Mountains of Madness, which is one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft stories that I've ever read, that takes place in Antarctica, and it's just interesting, like these vibes that kind of weave in and out of all these different stories by these different creators and storytellers. So yeah, man. But like I said, they're both cool. The Lovecraftian vibe, obviously very cool. The Resident Evil vibe, also very cool. So I would say, yeah, I think we both had a pretty positive first impression with both movies. I don't know. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And they definitely fit different audiences. So I'm sure people will have varying reactions. Like I stray a little bit more towards the artsy, Lovecraftian, like off the mainstream vibe. And I know you tend to go a little bit more mainstream and like really enjoy the action thing, which is why I think that we're pretty well suited to have this discussion. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think they both do a good job of being what they're intending to be.
Rewatching these movies, and after having had our discussion on The Shining versus Doctor Sleep, I was like, once again, our different our eclectic views are going to once again diverge here. But this is a little bit different because I went into the last episode with Doctor Sleep being, in my opinion, at that time, I was like, this is one of the coolest, horror films I've ever seen. If you could even call it a horror film, I just thought it was just an excellent
Right.
film, period. It doesn't even need to be genre specific. And I mean, neither does The Shining, of course. But I went into it. I was so surprised after that came out. I thought people were just going to be being like, shut up, man. You can't, how dare you ever say that anybody can come close to Stanley Kubrick. Blown away by the amount of people that were also like, no, dude, Dr. Sleep really was very, very cool, if not cooler than the original idea. Well, hey man, let's keep, before we get to any kind of criticisms, even though I know I've already jumped the gun on that and bitching about the gun, and there was no muzzle flash, no recoil, and I felt like the sound effects were off. Let's do favorite scenes, man. If you'd like to start with The Thing 1982, man, and bring up some of
Sure.
your favorite scenes from the film.
So if I had to choose, my favorite scene would probably be the blood test scene. One
Me
of
too.
Yeah, it was fantastic. The Probably one of the things that the 1982 thing did so tremendously well was the use of suspense, as opposed, because you kind of, again, like you have this divergence between 2011 does a really good job like sinking into that action romp, and then the 1982 is much more about this like real like suspense and body horror that where you're all crawly inside, and it's awful and great. But the this particular scene where you have they figured out how to test to see whether somebody's the thing, because the thing is going around and impersonating everybody, and it's really smart, and so it's able to exactly mimic people, and it's doing a really good job of hiding amongst the crew, and it's really trying to survive and perpetuate itself without like going out into the open. And so it's like a stealth game, and they figure out that if you draw somebody's blood and put it in a petri dish, that blood will also have the thing cells in it, and they aren't linked, so each one is acting independently. So if you threaten the thing, the cells that are in the blood, it'll react violently to preserve itself, even if it's not in the best interest of the thing that's over there, like, impersonating someone. So
It's almost
the
as though the thing is like a colony of organisms. So,
exactly,
so
with
you
their own
perceive it as
individual
one
thoughts.
person or one dog, but it's actually every single. If you cut that dog's paw off, which what a horrible thing to say, but if you it's not really a dog, man. It's an alien. If you
Yeah.
cut the alien dog's paw off, that paw is a sentient and autonomous creature unto itself at that point.
Yeah, basically, and which is really interesting and weird, and just like another content warning for viewers of these movies that we're sending out to watch these are very unfortunate movies for dogs. Like that was
Yeah.
by far the hardest part for me watching especially the John Carpenter one, was just like I hate seeing dogs hurt or in pain or die or anything like that, and
Yeah.
there are some very unfortunate things that happen to dogs in that movie.
There's a scene
But
where
yeah.
so in the kennel, and the thing. So, and also I want to say that the dog that is originally the thing when it first comes into their camp, the dog is a good actor. It's a really
Yeah.
good acting dog. I believe John Carpenter himself said that he thought that dog was a great actor. It just behaved like it knew it was on a movie. There's a scene
Yeah.
where it's like walking down like a hallway, and it's like looking in different rooms. Like it looks like a curious sentient alien is inside that dog. It's so lucky that they found, and it's a Siberian Husky, right? Is that the dog breed?
I think so.
But
Yeah, it's definitely a sled dog.
yeah, the scene that really bothered
think.
me, because yeah, dude, any kind of harm coming to a dog in a movie it really bums me out, and this movie has it, and it's really especially bad in the kennel scene, because they put the stray dog in, which is not a dog at all. It it explodes into the creature effects monstrosity of tentacles and shit, and it's trying to it's basically trying to kill all the other dogs. But I don't know why this bothered me more than even it killing the other dogs, was when one of the characters, I don't know who was the one that fired the weapon, but one of the dogs has a tentacle on it, and the dog, the dog is done for, but he shoots the dog, and the dog gives out a yelp, and I was like, ow. I was like, my heart. I was like, oh, I can't take this, but it's a horror film, dude. It's not supposed to make you feel cuddly and good. And this is also one of the most nihilistic, even for John Carpenter, this might be the most nihilistic film he ever made. And he made Halloween, like.
Yeah, it is bleak. But so segueing back to the blood test scene.
Yeah,
sorry.
So
it's so the blood in the petri dish is interacting as if it's its own organism. So they heat up a copper wire, and then they put it in the blood, expecting some sort of reaction from the blood to like get away from the copper wire. And so they've drawn blood from all of the different people, and who are all tied up. And they're going through them like one by one. And McCready, Kurt Russell's character, is heating up this wire, dipping in the blood, heating up the wire, dipping in the blood.
And Clark was human, huh? Which makes you a murderer, don't it?
Palmer now.
This is pure nonsense. Doesn't prove a thing.
I thought you'd feel that way, Gary. You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
The people feel pretty real in the sense that they're making mistakes and they're very flawed characters.
Yeah.
And so he goes through each one of those things, and then, you know, finally he hits like the vial that just absolutely explodes and the blood like goes everywhere as it's trying to escape this hot wire. That thing knows that, you know, he's been discovered, so he starts to transform into his whole like big like monster character like version or whatever.
And what I thought was cool with this is it really was the guy you expected the least. It's almost always the next person that is actually the thing you weren't expecting. But yeah, in this scene in particular, which I also agree with you, this is probably the best scene in the film. I think he really drew from Alfred Hitchcock a lot in this. When you're saying that this movie is also suspense,
right? Yeah, and because, you know, like Hitchcock, his famous discussion on suspense versus action, which I think is pretty relevant to this movie, is he talks about how, you know, if you put a bomb under a table and you have two people sitting at the table eating a meal, and then the bomb blows up, then the audience is going to get this really strong shock of like, oh, you know, crap, that bomb blew up and killed these people. And you get that really intense momentary, you know, shock. But that's a little bit less impactful than if you put the bomb under the table, show the audience the bomb, and then those two characters have like a 5-minute discussion on other things about their life, and they get humanized. And the John Carpenter does a great job of that throughout this entire movie. With, you are so uncomfortable throughout this entire time, and you never know which table the bomb's under, but you know that people that characters that you care about are sitting next to it, and it's going to explode. And so this one, this scene was just infused with tension, and then of course, you know, everything goes crazy once the action starts going.
Speaking of bombs, this is the scene that leads up to the one that you just described, but it's also one of the best scenes in the movie, and this is where they all start to suspect MacReady, Kurt Russell, as being, they're like, oh, he's the thing. Then they have all the circumstantial evidence. They cut the rope. He's out in a blizzard storm in Antarctica, and they cut the rope on him so he wouldn't be able to find his way back to base camp. He gets back anyway. He breaks in through a window, and they all come in to shoot him. And when they come in, he's got a bundle of dynamite with a fuse, and he has a lit flare. And he's like, anybody comes fucking near me, I'm lighting up his dynamite, and we all die.
Anyone messes with me and the whole camp goes. Come on, child, burn me. Put those torches on the floor and back off. Back off. Way off. You asshole.
You'd have done the same thing.
Don't argue with him.
That is hardcore. That is hardcore old Kurt Russell, man. And this is one of the things that was nostalgic about this film for me, is when I was a little kid, I thought Kurt Russell was the shit. And especially speaking of, you know, John Carpenter, I really think helped launch so much of Kurt Russell's career, because he was in Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, The Thing.
When some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps the back of your favorite head up against a barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye, and he asks you if you've paid your dues. Well, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye, and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
Like a lot of monster movies, you know, like they kind of hide the monster for one reason or another. They do it a lot in the 2011 because it's a CGI Resident Evil monster, and it's scarier if you don't show it too much. But you know, John Carpenter and you know, the people that he worked with and the artists, the effects, they're proud of what they'd made, and they're like, we're gonna show you everything, even the things that are silly and stupid. The scene, so not this entire scene, but there's the part that's the horrifying body horror where the guy is he has a defibrillator, and he's trying to perform a defibrillation on one of his friends, and right when he puts his hands down, the guy's entire chest turns into a giant gaping mouth full of razor sharp teeth and bites his arms off. And I don't even recall how this happens, but somehow they chop off that guy's head, and then that guy's head turns into a spider. It's like a head with spider legs running across the floor. I don't think this was meant to be scary because it's fucking stupid. And like, but I think that's the thing. I think John Carpenter, he knows how to not take himself too seriously a lot, because he makes a lot of B horror movies. He's like, here, let's have fun.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. A couple of things about that. First, that combination of pushing horror to the point where it's funny is like that comes up in my own writing pretty frequently, and it's interesting how there are not very many people that resonates well with, fewer than I would hope, because it really breaks the tension of the actual scary part, which a lot of people that are going to horror look for. Like I wrote this story that ended up getting published where long story short, but a woman was turning into a spider, and they were on this construction site, and she in the story that I wrote, which the editor ended up taking qualms with, and we made some edits that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but she birthed, her name was Brenda, and she was like a spider that had like a human face, because she started out as like a human character, and it was super creepy and weird. And then she had like this egg sac on her back, and like thousands of little baby spiders came out of it, and they looked the same with Brenda's little face. And like she was such an asshole, like, and sarcastic in the beginning of the story. And so you have all these little tiny baby Brendas that are like the main character's hiding in a closet, and they're like peeking up under the door, and it pushes it to the point where it's just ridiculous in a way that made me laugh a lot. But clearly the editor was like not on board with it. So the final version of the story that actually came out, all the baby Brendas were cut so that the tension could be maintained. And the part you were talking about kind of feels similar to me, in the sense that you do break the tension a little bit when you get a bit silly, but there's something really fun about that too, in a way that I personally enjoy, and a lot of people that like the B horror stuff tends to.
Well, first of all, I got to read this story. But second of all, what you're saying with the spider head in the film, I think there even is a line. Whoever had the flamethrower, I think it might have been McCready, I think he actually says, like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" before he lights it on fire. Like, but dude, I want to jump back to the other scene that we were kind of agreeing. It was like the second. I guess, like, for some reason we're choosing scenes that are not action scenes as some of the more like with the more Hitchcock inspired, or not so much. I guess the final scene, that's just extremely nihilistic and dark, and it really makes you feel the cold. And this is after kind of the final battle has been waged, and pretty much everyone's dead. We got Keith David, he's still alive. I keep calling him Keith David. I need to look at that character's name. Sorry, Childs. Okay. By the way, Keith David is fantastic in this. I love him as an actor. I would say my favorite thing Keith David has ever done, he was in Community, and he's such a great comedic actor. But in this movie, he's not trying to be funny. He's just a hardcore dude who wants to kill McCready. Like, him and McCready don't get along. And of course, they end up being the last two surviving people. And for all we know, one of them is the Thing. Is they've been separated. But they're in Antarctica. There's no generators. There's no power. There's no fire. There's nothing. It's night. It's winter. So we're looking at absolute certain death by hypothermia is upon them, and they're just sharing a bottle of whiskey, and they both don't trust each other. But I love the Kurt Russell line. He's like, hey, he's like, I know we still got some shit to work out, but he's like, I have a feeling neither one of us have enough left in us to do anything about it. He's like, so what do you want to do? And he's like, I don't know. I figure we'll just sit here, wait a while, and see what happens. And so they just sit there to drink whiskey and slowly freeze to death.
If you're worried about me,
If we've got any surprises for each other, I don't think we're in much shape to do anything about it. wait here for a little while. See what happens.
What a nihilistic scene, but also so well done, and some of the best acting in the movie. Of course, two of the best actors in the movie are left. I feel like we've really left Wilford Brimley sadly out of a lot of our discussion so far, but we'll get back to him when we get to acting. But hey, man, let's do favorite scenes. The Thing, 2011.
Yeah. So for me, one of my favorite parts about the 2011 was because each one, the novella and then John Carpenter's and then the 2011, they all take slightly different tacts on figuring out what the thing is, and they have their own tests and everything. So I really liked the scenes that revolved around that, where basically Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character is
Kate.
Kate. Okay, so she figures out that like people, anything that's implanted in the body, like a surgical implant or fillings, those inorganic pieces, the thing can't actually replicate. And so there's one scene.
Dude, can I guess? Are you gonna do the teeth fillings?
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump into that because I feel like, once again, I couldn't agree with you more on what you're selecting for some of the best plot devices and scenes. Okay, I'm back out. I'm bowing.
Okay. So they have a big scene similar to the wire and the blood petri dishes, where Kate is trying to figure out who is one of the things, or is likely to be one of the things. And she's got a flamethrower, and she's basically got like this whole room of men like hostage. And she's figured out that the thing can't replicate anything inorganic. And nobody trusts anybody, which is like one of the central themes of both of these movies. But so she has a flashlight and shines it in her mouth and is like, I have feelings. I am not one of the things. Let's go around and check each one of you. And so like she goes around to each of the guys, and they're like,
now tell Lars to open his mouth. Huh? Tell him to open his mouth.
Open op schaften Sie da.
Good. Now, Lars has feelings. So he's human. It can't imitate inorganic material.
Kind of crazy, like blue collar Norwegian like scientist guy or / labor guys open their mouths. Of course, they're just like covered with silver fillings that are very clearly distinguishing them as not the thing. So they get segregated off to one side of the room. And then the like real like asshole scientist guy does not have any sort of discernible fillings, although he he blames it on having porcelain fillings, which was funny for me watching it, because like I have a little bit of pretentious scientist in me, and I have ceramic fillings, and so I would have totally been on the wrong side of that.
Oh yeah, you could have totally been innocent, and you're like, shit, I didn't get metal fillings.
I know. Yeah, what a mistake. So I thought that was really cool. And I also like, it was a super flawed method, right? Like, so she was able to kind of pull aside basically half of the group and say, you are not the thing because of this particular reason. But that left half of the group that was innocent or not innocent, but still had the potential of being the thing. And so it was very imprecise, which I actually kind of liked, that it was an incomplete method, and that helped to carry some of the tension forward. And like I was saying with McCready in the previous one, like that element of making the wrong decision when you're just killing people because you think that they're an enemy is one of the more interesting and subtle tension pieces in this. And so that kind of maintained a little bit of that sense through this scene before everything kind of opens up and explodes. And just to annoy you a little bit, that and then the earring scene, but I think you probably wanted to talk about that one.
Oh no, you go ahead. I also, the earring scene on multiple levels, I think that is a great scene in a film. And okay, I might add a little bit of my own just spins on it after you're done.
Yeah. Well, I'll sketch it in, and then you can fill in some of the better parts. So, so at the very end, and this has been the kind of mechanism that Kate has been using to determine whether people were the thing or not. But you get to the very end, and it's her and Joel Egerton's character in the snowcat at the very end, and they've escaped from the ship, which they've blown up, and so this is like their opportunity for salvation. They're talking in the thing and in the snowcat, and she notices that he actually, instead of he's had his ear pierced throughout the entire thing, and as anybody who from a slightly older generation will know, like, you're supposed to have one side of your, or in the 90s, you were supposed to have like one side of your ears pierced. Like that had quite a bit of social commentary on who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And so she notices that his earring is actually missing, and then he like reaches up to touch where it should be, and he actually touches the wrong side, and she's like, bro, you're still the thing. And then she torches him, and in the process torches the snowcat, which is her potential for salvation. And like, just it's like, whatever, we have to she has a little bit of the McCready in the sense, and the other scientists, in the sense that being willing to self-sacrifice in order to keep the thing from spreading across the entire globe, because it is like an existential threat to humanity, which they get into, I think, in both of them, but I specifically remember the 1982 scene where they have like a computer making projections on how fast the thing will just take over the entire planet, and it's like this huge existential threat. And so people are willing to like sacrifice themselves and like go down with it. And so, and she realizes that that it's not safe to bring him back with her because he's probably the thing, and then torches him and her own vehicle on the way out and decides to freeze to death. So
yeah, no, great scene, great fucking scene. I would have noticed it too, especially if I had been alive and an adult at that time and been like, why did your earring, I would have noticed. I would have been like, your earring's in the wrong ear. It was ubiquitous back then, and having been a boy with an earring in the 90s, it was like ubiquitous. It was like you either pierce both your ears or just your left ear, and that's just like it's same thing with watches. Everybody, watch goes on your left arm. It's even like an idiosyncrasy. I kind of like, I mean, I don't wear any kind of jewelry of any sort anymore, but for the longest time, like, so I had, I would only adorn the left side of my body. So it's just the kind of thing I would really notice. I had, an earring in my left ear. I would only wear a watch on my left arm. I would only wear bracelets on my left arm. I only have a tattoo on my left arm. So I don't, it might be personal to me, but I feel like like you said, for millennials, a lot of people are going to really like the earring catch that she does. It doesn't seem far-fetched or like that it's a minute detail. You'd be like, oh no, she would have caught that, especially in that time period.
Yeah, it was a big identity signal to other people, and everybody was very aware of that. So
Can I bring up a Joel Edgerton scene that you wouldn't think I would bring this up as a great scene, but I like what it does. It's a great plot device to show that he's a good guy. And so late, it's also it hurts at the end when she flame throws him. You're like, oh man, there's ships in the night, because you really you kind of hope, you're like, maybe this scientist is gonna end up with this rough around the edges helicopter pilot. Maybe there's a chance, but alas, his earring was the wrong ear. She lit him up. But there's a scene. So when he's flying them into base camp, and he turns around and he sees her and he's like, oh, she's an American, and they're like, yeah, and he's like, turns around and tells her to put her headphones on so that she can hear him over the rotors. And he's like, excuse me, I have a problem. I have a question I want to ask you. And so you immediately you think, oh, this guy's going to hit on her. It's going to be awkward and cringy. I almost, I thought it was going to be one of those just movie tropes where he's like, hey, and tries to like hit on, and then she shuts him down hardcore. And she's like, I'm not that kind of girl. Like they set you up for that kind of trope. And I'm like, ugh, this is terrible. But then instead, and you have to remember, because they filmed this in 2011, but this is supposed to be 1981, because this would have been the year before the John Carpenter film. For this to be the prequel, this would have had to have been the previous season. So, or I guess this could have been 82. It's summer 82.
I think it was the same season just before. But
Okay, so yeah, it's 82. But yeah,
Yeah.
but what I realized is like these people don't have iPhones, they don't have internet, all this stuff. So when he's a huge fan of, what is he, a fan of the Lakers or the Clippers
yes.
or the Jazz? I think he's a fan of the Clippers. He's a
Okay.
Anyway, he turns around and he's like, hey, I have a problem up here. I can't get a newspaper that's not old, that's not at least 3 weeks old. And he's like, can you please tell me like what's going on with the Clippers right now? Because he's like a huge sports fan. It also humanizes him. You're like, oh, okay, cool. He loves the Clippers. That's what, and also he's not being fucking. Yeah, and the scene I was going to bring up, I do agree with you. The CG is a little bit less than I would like it to be at times, and the scene that I'm about to bring up relies really heavily on the CG. However, doesn't ruin the scene for me. I still think it's one of the greatest scenes in the movie. This is after the point. This is when people are still not listening to Kate. She's like, there's clearly there's an infection. This thing can mimic. She's already got the science behind it. She's already is in the lab. It could be anyone. No one believes her. There's one other woman on the entire research station. Her name is Juliet in the film. She's played by Kim Bubbs, and she's like, hey, look, I believe you. And as a matter of fact, I saw someone doing some shady shit that, and I have access to all the keys to everything in this facility to help you, do your plan. And she's like, great, show me. So she, of course, takes her to this isolated, weird shed room where Kate turns her back, starts fumbling through the keys. And she's like, how many keys are there? And she's like, there's 5. And she goes and she's like, there's only 4 keys. And then you just hear her going, oh, and like this. Disturbing, awful moan, and you turn around and her body has split into, once again, kind of like the scene with the defibrillator in 82. Her body is mostly a mouth, and she's like split into, her head's hanging off on one side, moaning. She's mostly teeth. Kate takes a run for it. She runs, she's running. Some scientist sticks his head out. He's like, what's going on? She's like, run. And he's too fucking doofus to do it. He just, before he can get his mind around what run means, he sits there in this giant gaping mouth with this woman's head hanging off the side of it, chomps him to pieces. And that's when the first time they bust out the flamethrower in this film. Once again, I love that they took the flamethrowers and they made that an absolute, because the flamethrowers are such an important part of the first movie, and so they stay true. And flamethrowers it is the number one weapon. It's the only real weapon that humans use against this creature is flamethrowers. It's the first flamethrower that gets used. Whole scene, fucking awesome. Tons of action. CG's fine,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was fun. That one really, it felt more like a successful iteration of the monster romp, because like monsters out in the open, running, tearing people up. And yeah, it's wild. I thought that they did a good job with that one as well.
All right, man. Well, now comes the part where we have to be a little bit harsh on these films we love. But this is a head-to-head, dude, and it's a versus. Like we said, it's 82 versus 2011. So, man, if you don't mind, if you want to kick it off with
Sure.
criticisms for The Thing, 1982.
Yeah. So for me, I enjoy the 1982 version a whole lot. One of the interesting parts about its reception was because it flopped like pretty hard. Like it was really poorly critically received and everything else.
It actually damaged John Carpenter's career immensely.
Yeah.
He lost his
immensely.
deal with Universal over this film.
Yeah. And people were like freaking out in theaters because it was such a visceral body horror and very much ahead of its time in that regard. Like we're a little bit desensitized now, but but it was like people were like losing their minds, like running out of the theater and like throwing up and like all kinds of craziness. And yeah, well, hopefully they ran out instead of throwing up in the theater, because that would be way worse even than the sticky popcorn.
I think this came out the same year as E.T. too. So people were like,
right.
they're like, oh, E.T.
Oh, another
aliens are
little
fun,
alien movie.
and then they go see this shit, and it's like the most gory, depressing, no redeeming.
Everything, right? And so anyway, so it was pretty much panned as, you know, just like, oh, it's a blood fest. It's like over the top. The only reason that you go see this is to like compete with your friends to see who could, you know, keep from closing their eyes or whatever. And and so yeah, so it was really interesting how that part was received. And I've gotten a little bit off of my own track, but anyway, circling back to the criticism that I had for it, because they connect at some point, and we'll get back there. But I think that one of the things that led to people walking away with that impression was that it lacked a satisfying conclusion in any sense. And that was, I mean, it's fun, especially viewing it as like a classic and kind of like an artistic film. Like that sense of dread and lack of fulfillment is very much an artistic choice that John Carpenter was making and was very much succeeding at. Like it really leaves you with that discomfort, because the entire movie is just like awfully discomforting the entire time. Like you are like grossed out and your skin is crawling and like horrified, like pretty much the whole time, super tense. And so I think it was a real artistic choice of his to leave it with so much ambiguity and such a lack of satisfaction. And there's definitely something to be said for having movies that are not satisfying. But at the same time, if you really commit to saying something, which is harder, and you lose a degree of flexibility when you let go of that obfuscation, even if you wanted us to be dissatisfied, if he had like really committed to an ending in the narrative itself, you know, instead of leaving all of the doors wide open, I think that would have probably engendered a greater response from the audience and made it a more efficient tool for communicating and getting his messages and the feelings that he was intending. So that would be my primary criticism for 82, aside from some plot holes and all that.
Yeah, there are some plot holes that can't be denied, but that's actually not where I'm going to like, you already knew I was going to do this with my main criticism, and that's part of the reason I thought that, you know, you were going to be a great co-host for this as well. You have spent a lot of time on snowy mountains. You've been in very, very cold environments for long periods of time. You know the importance of gear and the importance of what you're, you know, the clothing that you wear. And this is, I hate to say that, it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but I'm not, because you know, part of what the vibe of the film is that it's so cold. They're like, we're in Antarctica, we're always cold. At the very end, they're like, the survivors don't survive because they freeze to death. They even go as far as to tell you what the temperature is. He's like, it's going to be 40 degrees below zero tonight, you know. And yet, with all that, we have so many scenes with Kurt Russell wearing a thin bomber jacket and like khaki pants, like just walking around Antarctica dressed like that. And so many of these other guys also wearing absurdly underdressed for that kind of, I mean, that's the kind of weather that freezes you to the bone. I mean, you lose fingers, you lose your nose, your ears
very quickly. Yeah,
very quickly too. It's not just like, oh, I'm cold. You know, I've been very cold. I've been very, very cold before, but I've never been Antarctica cold. And so yeah, I hate to have to be the guy to say this, but I guess the costume department, and you know, it's, you know, they gave McCready a cool outfit. He looks like a cool dude, especially for the 1980s and that style. Right. But sadly, that is not how you dress in Antarctica. Maybe like indoors you could dress like that, but he spends so much time outdoors, and his winter hat is literally like a giant like Canadian Mountie like silly, like it's almost like a cowboy hat sombrero hybrid. The point is, he would need to be wearing like something with like ear flaps, like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
so costume
and-
department really dropped the ball on what people wear in Antarctica.
Right. Well, even more than the costume department, I would imagine it was probably a choice by the producers, because like you get this Hollywoodification, right? Like where like you start with the novella, which everybody is like bundled, and they talk about, they're wearing like that bright orange, like puffy Arctic wear that's like legitimately what scientists would wear when they're in extremely cold temperatures. And like that's seeded all through the novella. Like it's very accurate in that regard. And then you go to the 1982 version, and like they've stripped out like a lot of that in order for it to be more visually appealing to their audience, where they don't want everybody in like super huge parkas all the time. Kurt Russell needs to be like flexing his star power and like all of that kind of stuff or whatever. And so they stripped down the layers quite a bit. And then that only continues forward into the 2011. The scene that I remember the most for this particular part was the first time that they go into base camp, and like in the 1982 version, they're wearing kind of preposterous thin clothing, but you can tell that the pants have like a little bit of insulation. Like they have a little bit of that puff, like you see when people are doing recreational snowboarding, where like it's got a little bit of insulation.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
It's not appropriate for Antarctica, but it's
by any stretch of the imagination.
Exactly, but you might see it at a ski resort. And then in the first like shot in Antarctica in 2011, a lot of the scientists are wearing basically skinny jeans, where like the fabric is straight, which means like there is like no insulation in there. It's like a single wall layer, right? And like with those kind of temperatures, you would be toast like super fast. Like it
would burn. It would feel as though you were burning. That's how cold like the kind of cold experience is like.
It's super awful. Like unless you're like, for me, it was interesting. The background that we've alluded to a couple of times being that I just recently hiked the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada. And so you're going across the mountaintops all the way from Mexico to Canada, and you go through the high Sierras, and you're like 13,000 feet in the elevation, sitting around 12,000 all the time, and it was freaking enormously freezing there. Like, and any exposed skin would immediately start to burn. We were one particular day, probably my coldest day on trail. We were going up to Mather Pass, 12,000 feet. The wind is just absolutely howling. And I literally had cloth covering every inch of my skin, except for just like the tip of my nose, because I couldn't get whenever I had a buff that was wrapped around my face. And anytime that it was covering my nose, all the air would go down and it would saturate the buff with the moisture from my breathing. And then that would make it even more cold. So I had to have my nose out. Totally got frostbite on my frost nip on my nose. Like it just like blistered and burned, and it was red, and it swelled out to like 1.5 times its size. Like it was so awful, like the entire time throughout that whole thing. And it got down to like 0 that particular night, and it was just like, or near 0 at least, and it was abominably cold. But that's like still positive temperatures, like that's not -40, right? Like that's when you get down to those levels, it just gets insane. I have family in Washington, or in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and my mom tells stories about how she would go out from the shower with wet hair to go to work, and your hair would freeze immediately to where, like, if you were getting into the car and you brushed it, it would snap chunks off.
That's
like
insane.
No, it's insane. And there it gets similar. Like she talks about it getting down to about -40 Fahrenheit there. But yeah, that kind of cold, it's like a whole other world, and it kind of has its own rules and physics, and like which a lot of the general audience probably wouldn't be able to relate to, and they'll probably give these kind of details a little bit of a pass. But if you're going for like actual authentic Arctic wear, like, yeah, it's a little lacking in the Hollywood versions.
And that's, I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head right there when you said Hollywood, that these films, these are, well, actually, I don't know much about Matthijs. He might actually be from Norway and have experienced, a good bit of cold, but these are Hollywood films, and Hollywood is in Southern California, where you would never, ever experience anything like this. And maybe you're just, it just maybe it's just slipped their mind that like that, people like us are going to watch this, and it's at times I'm taken out of the movie. I'm watching it and I'm like, dude, put on a parka. Like,
what are you doing? You need to have fingers in order to do the tests to solve which person is the thing. Come on.
I do not want to go in tearing it apart, because like I said, I mean, the 1982 the thing 1982 does such a great job of showing you that this is just a group of kind of blue collar guys. The paranoia builds and they all start turning on each other, and it's just and there is the sadness and freakiness of all that. But I feel like they don't bother to explain to me what exactly, what are some of these guys even doing there? I mean, like, for instance, you got the one guy, his entire job is that he operates a CB radio. You wouldn't need a person that's their sole job. That his name is Windows, played by Thomas G. Waits. Windows is probably also maybe my least favorite character. But yeah, so that's kind of like, he's not a research scientist. What is he doing there? He literally just works the radio that doesn't even work. They can't even contact people. It's a kind of a bizarre job. They got the guy. It makes a little more sense to have a cook. That's Knowles, and he was played by TK Carter. I grow to like Knowles more throughout the film, but in the beginning, his whole thing is he roller skates, which I found to just suck. I didn't like that was his thing, is that he was wearing an apron and roller skating through the facility. I was like, this is silly in a way that I don't think it was intended. I don't like the head with the spider legs, silly on purpose. The cook that roller skates, I was like, do you guys think this is how someone would actually act?
Right.
A couple other characters I just thought weren't super necessary. I mean, but I guess
gotta have somebody to blow up, I guess, right? Like but I agree that they were all really reduced down to kind of, well, very cardboard, archetypal roles, as opposed to being fleshed out people, which is interesting because the main characters also have more flaws in the 1982 one, I think, as well. I don't know if you're familiar with the term plot armor.
No.
Okay, so basically, with a main character in a creative work, because they're the center of the plot, a lot of the time they really kind of have this plot armor where you pretty much know that they're going to make it through. You kind of feel it with Mary Elizabeth Winstead a little bit in the 2011, where like stuff's blowing up and she's the only one that's like not getting eaten. Kurt Russell kind of falls into this a little bit too, but there's that sense that they're going to be okay because they're the focus character until the end, obviously. This is one of the few movies that actually breaks with that, to the extent that they'll kill their respective characters, but most of the time they won't. But anyway, in the 1982 one, the main character is like Kurt Russell. Like, he's pretty flawed. Like, he's a bit of a dick. He disses on Norway quite a bit, I think.
I forgot we didn't even bring that up. It's one of my favorite things about him is his absurd. He absurdly hates Norwegian and Swedish people, and it's never explained why. We get the impression that he's a Vietnam veteran because of the time period and the way he dresses. He looks like he still wears some of his some of the clothing that was issued to him in the war, and he might have a little bit of PTSD. But the fact that he hates Norwegians and then Swedes. What?
Yeah, like it was because he keeps referring to the Norwegians as Swedes throughout the entire thing, right? Like, he just doesn't care where they're actually from whatsoever. But so, like, he's a bit of a dick, and he clearly makes bad decisions, like killing a dude that was not the thing, and everything else. So, which is pretty good character work in terms of making them feel like more complete characters, which is interesting because Carpenter also decided to really flatten the side characters, like Windows and Knowles to a degree, where they have like one defining element, but not a full personality. They're mainly there to be part of the source of tension and fodder and have something for the thing to eat or to have Kurt Russell kill or whatever. So it's interesting how that dichotomy runs, where the 1982 has both of those. I feel like the 2011 probably has a little bit more of a center in those, where the main character isn't very flawed at all, but the other ones don't feel as boiled down to a specific trait. So it's an interesting point to bring up.
And I guess one thing that this is not a criticism, it's actually, it's one of the things, it's one of the plot devices in the 2011 that I thought was really good. And that's Ulrich Thompson's character is he's the billionaire doctor that puts the whole thing into place. And I've like I said to you before, what I liked so much about that is that the blame lies almost solely on a narcissistic billionaire. And that is so fucking real to me. It's more real to me than the monster, because it could have been anything. They could have found something in the ice. And when he makes that decision where he's like, oh, I'm going to drill into this. I'm not wearing a hazmat suit. We're not taking any precautions. We're just going to drill into the ice. Even after the scientists are like, hey, man, you don't know what kind of biological hazards you might be exposing us to. And he's like, I'm a billionaire. And it just, it's like how when Elon Musk, when those kids were trapped in that cave, and he wanted to build like a Tesla submarine. And when people called him stupid, he started calling the guy that was the soccer coach a pedophile because just as he was mad, lashing out because he's like a giant, billionaire child.
Mm-hmm.
As you can tell, I don't much care for billionaires. Anyway, I just thought it was great. It was great that that Ulrich Thompson is, it's the billionaire's fault. It's a good plot device that really, really works for me. I know we're in the criticism section, but I'm bringing up the
no, and that it was really aimed, I think, to appeal to that sensibility that you were just describing, in the sense that there is a villain to hate. So there's a monster that romps and a villain to hate. It's really built to be a much more satisfying movie as opposed to the 1982 one, where there's no real villain. Even like when I think that they get into a little bit, like the thing is more of its own character. It's not like in the 2011, it's more like a force of nature, like a crazy monster violence thing. In 2000 in the 1982 version, it's more of a character that's trying to like sneak around, and it's intelligent and almost a little bit scared of being discovered. It's trying to like preserve itself through this situation that it wasn't able to escape originally, because that's how it ended up in this mess anyway. It crashed its ship into Antarctica and got frozen, and so it doesn't want to get frozen again. It needs a portal out to the outside world where it can actually flourish, and so it's being more hesitant, it's being more cautious, and then of course like the novella was even more of that. But so you don't really have like an antagonist to hate. Even the thing really, and it's part of what lends itself to that non-satisfyingness, and I think they really corrected for that, maybe a little bit too far in my personal perspective, but I think a lot of people would disagree with me in terms of making 2011 feel much more satisfying by having hateable protagonist, and the thing is kind of like black and white, evil, unthinking monster, and everything's kind of a lot easier in that regard. And so I'm totally on board with that. Really pretty fun and easy to hate the billionaire, asshole, who's also a patriarchal guy who's like, being a dick to our main character, all that kind of stuff. Like it was,
that's why I had the gall to even suggest that we do this comparison. A lot of people will be like, how dare you suggest that there's a film, prequel, remake, whatever you want to call it, of a John Carpenter film that that dares to be questioned. Hey man, I'm questioning because like I thought 2011, it's a fun film, super fun. I would say this is a little off topic, but it's with the Halloween franchise, and I thought that when Rob Zombie took over to do the 2 Halloween films, I thought those were spectacular. I think those are maybe certainly the first one of those two is probably my favorite of all the Halloween movies. So I know that's also maybe a bit of blasphemy for some people. I love Rob Zombie and I love him as a director, and I think everything he touches seems to turn to gold. We'll see with this Monsters movie he's coming out with. It's his first PG movie. So I think what it was is I started just praising it again in the middle of the criticism section.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, well, there were, I mean, similar plot holes to the original or whatever too, and some unbelievable science, which ends up irking me, just as a personal pet peeve or whatever. Like with, so they pull the creature out of the ice. They like cut a big block of ice out or whatever, and they bring the ice back to their base. And so you have this creature that's fully encased in a block of ice, and so you get the scene where people are talking in the ice room, and there's like a jump scare, but nothing happens. And then they're like exiting the room, and they're looking back over their shoulder, and like this is the place where I think John Carpenter would have like made like some little motion in the ice, like a little twitch or something. But instead, it just explodes out of the ice. Like the creature is like fully awake and active, and leaps out of the ice and like goes on this big rampage, which makes no sense scientifically. Like if the ice is still ice temperature and the creature is inactive at ice temperature, and it's got this little pilot hole that's been drilled down into it, just from a thermogenic perspective, the creature's body temperature couldn't have come up enough to give it that amount of capacity for movement and activity without the rest of the ice having melted, and it's still fully encased in ice. Okay, so I'm going off onto a side.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is a fucking plot hole. I think I think I overlooked it because it occurs in a jump scare that is overshadowed by a jump scare. So because the one guy, the helicopter co-pilot goes in just to look at it, and then one of the Norwegians comes in and goes boo and scares them, and it works. It's a little, it's a jump scare that gets the audience. As the audience, you're like, whoa. And then immediately after that, of course, the ice explodes, and there's the big reveal jump scare. And it's the way that was layered.
Jesus. Screw you, man. Son of a...
Honestly, maybe I just completely overlooked how fucking scientifically improbable that is.
Right.
Man, I feel like we really are shitting on 2011 really hard right now. There is one thing. It would be, if I didn't say it, it would be I would be hedging my bets here and trying too hard to let 2011 get away with too many things. And I will say this: I think that the second to last scene, which is when they go to the mothership spaceship where this alien supposedly came from, which I guess we should assume also is full of other entities that are like this creature or not or whatever. The entire mothership spaceship scene could have and probably should have been edited out of the film. It wasn't necessary, and it just added a lot of it just added a ton of plot holes that didn't need to be added to the mountain it already had. So
it was a little bit of a why moment. I think that they really wanted to do something that diverged from being an entire remake, and so they're like, let's have them go into the ship or whatever. But yeah, for me as well, like I was kind of like, why are you here? But at the same time, as I was saying a little bit earlier, like it's also 2011, I think, was built to be a fun movie. Like that was much more of the emphasis, instead of being this like horror, like body horror, like discomfort bonanza that the 1982 version was. Like it was a romp, and it was fun in its own right in those regards, despite its flaws.
Yeah, and like I mean, and it wasn't bad. Like I mean, I wasn't like they didn't go into the spaceship, and I was like, oh fuck this, fuck this movie. I'm gonna turn this off. That didn't happen. I just was saying like it wasn't super necessary because I feel like what it was. I think what bothered me the most was why wasn't Kate killed in the spaceship? Like, wouldn't that alien been should have been once it's shown to be as powerful as it actually was? Like, why can't it just kill her? It's
yeah.
It's I mean,
Yeah.
and John Carpenter is guilty of that in other films. I think where there's scenes where someone is running from one of his monsters or killers, and you're like, why doesn't the monster or killer just run faster? Why doesn't Michael Myers just pick up the fucking pace? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah,
We're going
and
into the scoring section, and I think that it's only appropriate that we start with the most controversial aspect of scoring, which is action / special effects. Man, do you want me to dive in, or you want to go first?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. Look, hey, look, this is a touchy subject, for sure. Because I mean, yeah, let's face it. The practical effects in The Thing 1982, these are widely lauded, for throughout the decades now. I mean, I know that movie was a big flop when it came out, but it has since grown a huge cult following, and people love the artistic endeavors that went into it, and everything they did. It was all handmade, it was all real. There's no computers involved. Very, very cool. So, man. There is one scene that's that does involve a computer. I just want to bring it up real quick. It's when Wilford Brimley has decided, he's like, I guess they have an AI and some like old ass like one of the first computers that was ever created, and so he like types in some data, and he's like, what's the chances that we're infected by this alien? And then it plays like this Japanese video game called Agario that people play now. I don't think it was out then, but it's just large circles eat small circles, and it does that for a while. Then it goes 75% chance you've all been infected, or someone's infected. That was silly, but that's not the point. That's not action. Man, I'm gonna give, damn, action's good, man, and good action actors. You got Kurt Russell, dude. I mean, he's an action star before he's anything else, for sure, to me. Keith David's excellent. I love the fact that they're using flamethrowers. They were using real flamethrowers on set. Kurt Russell is holding a real flamethrower. He was interviewed and said that there were several times where he thought it was extremely dangerous because it was an unpredictable weapon, and there was times he was like, fuck, dude, I'm shooting a real flamethrower in this movie. Someone could get very, very hurt. So hell yeah, fucking super cool using real flamethrowers. Action's great, man. I'm gonna solidly give. Oh man, there was a couple things I didn't like at the end with the final battle. That's where I'm gonna. That's where the marks get taken when the thing becomes like more powerful and is like coming at him under the floor. Solid 4 stars. 4 stars out of 5 for action for 1982. What do you say, man?
Yeah, I think I can join you there. The practical effects were spectacular in the just as an artist, like looking at the layers that went into, like there's one shot of one of like the Thing's corpses that's been partially burned that's on an exam table, and it's like the layers, like, because you have like the baseline structure of the sculpture, and then you have like layers of texture over that, and then like layers of like liquid, like goop stuff over the top of that. And like, anyway, the way that it's built up, it's just fantastic looking. Like they just did a spectacular job. There's actually a replica of that scene in the 2011 that they used with CG, and you can really tell the comparison. Like it's just not even there. But yeah, like the practical effects were great. Kurt Russell is awesome, doing his whole actiony thing. Flamethrowers, super awesome. That would be super scary because you have a bomb strapped to your back like that entire time as well, and you can't predict where the flaming gasoline is going to go. And so yeah, I will. I'll meet you there on a solid 4. You know, it was great. It was very much an action 80s movie, and so it gets a little bit over the top and silly, but especially in like the later scenes that you mentioned. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Super appreciative of the artistic integrity of like the models that they made and stuff. So yeah, I'll join you on a 4 there.
Oh yeah, man. All right, you heard it here first. Actions of 4. That's a great score. And I don't know if you noticed what I was doing there. I found a pencil. It was the biggest, the biggest fucking mistake I made in the Stephen King episode, is I did not have a pencil and I wasn't writing down the score. I mean, we came to the conclusion was what we thought the conclusion was going to be. However, this time around, I will be able to actually at the end have a solid. We know what the score is. Yeah, man, you go for it.
Okay, good. So we'll sandwich it. So yeah, so for 2011, it was fun. It had more of an action movie feel to it, in the sense that you have creatures and you're running around and a lot of stuff explodes, whole lot of CGI. For me, I didn't value it quite as much because the CGI was a little bit unreal. Like when they do the first time in the helicopter and the dude's like face splits open, and it's just like, that is 100% CG. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, so there was some of that, and then some, of like the inclusions of the action scene in the spaceship felt a little bit superfluous, and whatnot. So I thought it was fun and worthwhile in that sense. But I'm gonna go a 1 star down from my 1982 version, and I'll go with a 3.
All right, man. I accept what you said, but I am gonna go ahead and chime in here with how I feel. And so much of it is what you said earlier, that this movie is so much more of a romp. It's a little bit cleaner. That's a lot of stuff I like a lot. There's no Foley effects that I thought were extremely disturbing, like when the gun didn't make sense to me. Like why isn't the gun, why is the gunshot sound just randomly happening? And I didn't even take any points off for that either. I left that alone. It's just one mistake.
I didn't even bring up the helicopter scene with the sound editing for the when they're do you remember that part?
The sound editing is absurd. How they're able to have conversations without their fucking headphones on in a helicopter.
And then they put the headphones on, it doesn't change. So
yeah,
but yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
Have you ever been in a helicopter?
No, I've been in quite a few planes, including a acrobatic plane, which was
sick.
A similar kind of a thing where we were like barrel rolling around. You have the same kind of headphones on, but I haven't actually been in a helicopter yet.
I've been in a helicopter, and it's if you don't have headphones on, you would have to scream everything you need to say to the. Whatever. I'm talking action, man. I'm talking action. To me, I've seen a lot. On the comments, people leave and certain things. People didn't think the CGI was great. I think the CGI was fine. It's not. I mean, it's not the best CGI I've ever seen. It's not fucking. It's also not like Avatar. It's not a fucking $200 million movie. So I'm not gonna punish them for not being able to afford like the best CGI ever, because it worked. Go ahead.
To that point as well, I think that like I'd read that they actually made physical models like for a lot of those scenes, and then they actually weren't allowed to use them. There was some sort of higher up decision to go full CG, or for the most part, aside from that rig that I was mentioning. So I don't blame the filmmakers for that either. Just to throw that in there.
Oh yeah, that was there are a lot of like what you're saying with things with the studio that this could have been a much better film, but the studio really got involved and they did rewrites, a lot of things that didn't need to happen, and I think they detracted from what could have been the final product. I mean, this film could possibly have been a film that everyone would have agreed. They would have been like, oh, this is actually better in so many ways if they hadn't done so many rewrites, like you said, taking away some, like they were going to have some practical effects, ended up having none. So yeah, I hear you there, man. But in your own words, man, it was a romp, start to finish, fun as hell. The flamethrowers were cool as hell. The when Juliet becomes a giant mouth and chases Kate down the hallway and eats the scientist, that's fun as hell to me, man. A lot of great shit. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna throw them a 4, dude. They're gonna get the 4 treatment on action.
All right.
All right, dude. Moving on. Now we're on plot for 1982.
Right. Yeah. I enjoyed the plot. I'm assuming that we're probably going to include pacing in that as well. And I thought that this movie was particularly well paced as far as the tension goes.
Agreed.
Because it simmers throughout the entire thing. You know, that whole bomb under the table, like, you know, shit is like just about to go down at all times, and then they defy your expectations and make it the last character that you would expect at an improbable time, and you really get that like burst of intense discomfort. And I love the cold open, that whole initial scene of being confused and trying to figure out what was actually happening, and you know, kind of the themes that were running through all of that. And everything else, and then you get lots of fun flamethrower stuffs. There are obviously some holes, and as I mentioned, I thought that the direction that they took the ending, you know, could have been a little bit more sewed up to kind of help stick the landing in a way that would have enabled it to be a vehicle that, you know, more people enjoyed and were able to participate in. I was solidly freaked out like the entire time. Really great tension. So I'm gonna go with a 4 there as well.
Wow, you're okay. All right, man.
Yeah.
4, 1982 on plot. Shit, man. This is weird because I thought I was the guy that was supposed to be fighting for the underdog here, but I guess not. Because I'm gonna say with the plot. And you know, this is the place where I'm going to overlook shit like costume design and these people should have frozen to death wearing their silly clothes. I'm not going to bring that into plot because that's not really the plot. That's it's aesthetic in a way to me. So I believe it, man. I believe the Norwegians chasing the dog. I believe that ACAB fucking Andy Griffith would have an itchy trigger finger, would shoot that Norwegian without stopping to hear what he had to say, just because he's like, hey, he had a gun, I was scared, you know, even though he was inside a building. So totally the kind of thing like that, that type of cop to me. Also, why do they have a cop? I don't know. That's this is where like this is actually does draw away from the plot, man. These guys, they're so close to a solid 5 with me because I believe it. I believe, you know, these are a bunch of blue collar guys. This is how they'd act. The tension between Keith David and Kurt Russell, fantastic. I mean, that's, you know, I would believe that there would be guys having those problems. I believe they'd take Wilford Brimley, and I would, you know, I believe Wilford Brimley would have a freak out, or you know, the character that he is, and he breaks all their radio equipment because he doesn't want the thing to get away, and then instead of having a conversation with him, they just go lock him in a shed. You know?
Okay, Blair. Come on, man. You don't want to hurt anybody. I'll kill you.
The plot is fantastic, man. You know, a thing, you don't know who it is. Everybody's freaking out. But yeah, the Hitchcock feel. They almost get a 5, but there are just some that just had to be plugged, and they weren't plugged. So it brings it down, and I give it also a 4, which is all. I mean, that's a fantastic score. That's a good ass score. So yeah. I mean, I don't feel like I'm being harsh at all when I give them a 4. All right, man. Let's do plot 2011.
Yes. So it also follows. I mean, I really like the plot of the novella, which both of these spring from. Like, I think it's highly engaging in terms of the scenario where you have the thing, and then it's like you don't know who it is, and like we get a little bit pulled back sometimes from thinking about like the fundamental scenario of this situation, which is technically plot as well, and yeah, fantastic in that as well. And I really liked some of the elements. I like how it dovetails with the first movie. Like it really kind of gets interesting, the fact that they repeat the 1982 with a little bit of their own twists, and then the two movies mash up together, which makes kind of an interesting statement as well about human nature, and the fact that there is so much repetition between the two movies, that this happened the same way with the same paranoia and claustrophobia and explosion of distrust happened both in this Norwegian camp as well as the US camp, in pretty much the same way. And you could interpret that as a statement towards how these actions and this response is pretty much endemic to the human condition, given this set of circumstances. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And yeah, they made some questionable choices with the that whole going into the spaceship and all of that. But just in terms of the fundamental plot, yeah, it was a romp. It was fun. I would definitely, I'd probably go with a 4, or either a 3 or a 4, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for 4.
All right, hit him with a 4, man. And I, dude, we're like, I mean, obviously we both liked both these movies, so I mean, why aren't they? Why wouldn't they get good scores? Right. Yeah, dude, and like I'd said before, man, with the plot with this one, dude, the fact that it's all a billionaire's fault, I fucking buy it, dude. It's absolutely the little scientist boy that introduces her to the billionaire, and he's a sniveling little bitch, and when she like comes in with the evidence that could have saved maybe all of their lives, when she's like, hey, this is what's happening, like we discovered what's going on, and she's like, hey, you were there, you saw it, you back me up, is a second opinion. And he goes, I don't know what I saw. I totally believe that guy would act like that. Those guys are called nice guys. That's what they're referred to as. Why don't girls like nice guys? Because you fucking don't have a spine. That's why girls don't like nice guys. The fact that it's the billionaire's a piece of shit, while this monster is running, while the rampage is happening, you don't know what's happening. The suspense is great. I love that the blue collar, hard drinking Norwegian dudes are the most trustworthy people, really, that are available to Kate. That's cool. Also, that feels very real to me. And yeah, like you said, it's a romp. It's well paced. I mean, there's so much going on that makes it just totally work for me. Man, I honestly, I mean, like I said, I didn't love the spaceship, but it doesn't ruin the film, and it doesn't make anything else less real. The alien got here somehow, got here in a fucking spaceship. They didn't have to go in it, but they did. I'm gonna just go ahead and throw them a 5 on plot, man. It's not flawed enough to say that it doesn't deserve to say that this is a good enough plot. Do you think, am I being too kind?
It's your prerogative.
Fuck it, man. I watched the movie, and I at no point watching it did I go bullshit. So yeah, that's where I stand on it.
Right.
We'll throw a
cool.
We'll throw a fucking 4, because I'm being insane if I give that a 5. All right, I'm giving it a 4 on plot. Next up, we got acting.
If you're worried about me,
If we've got any surprises for each other, I don't think we're in much shape to do anything about it.
well, what do we do?
Why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
Yeah, so for me, like I thought that the acting in the 1982 version was very good. The amount of discomfort and fear that the cast was able to portray was palpable throughout the entire thing. Like they really sold that for me in the sense that, and it conveyed it to me, like it is a very uncomfortable experience, like watching these people go through all of this intense trauma, and Kurt Russell doing Kurt Russell things, like when he's all cold and shaking and has the frickin' bomb, the stick of dynamite and the flare and all of that. Yeah, it was good. And then, you know, a lot of the other stuff with, you get some, you know, some of the cardboard characters like Windows or whatnot that don't really shine as much, but that's okay. And then you get really good and kind of weird moments like at the end with their whole 80s macho, you know, drink ourselves to death in the cold kind of a deal. So I really enjoy the acting. I really felt it from the cast, like all that fear and everything else. So, you know, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was a masterclass, but I also really valued it. Yeah, so I'm going to go a 4 with that one as well.
You're going to give him a 4. All right, man.
I'm going to give him a 4. It was solid in my perspective, just based on how I felt. Like I felt the characters a lot, which for me is usually the sign of good acting. That when it's so emotionally resonant, and like they were freaking out, and I generally, you know, like they felt real for the most part. So that's my main bar for there.
And even like you said, even some of the cardboard characters had some moments to shine, like because I think Knowles was a cardboard character at the beginning, but when they're all when McCready has them all tied down and he's doing the blood test, and they're all freaking out because they know that someone that they're tied to is the thing. He really gets to shine by also showing that, you know, the terror. The guy that I can't remember his name, but he's the guy that's in charge of the dogs. He runs the kennel. He shows like, you know, he's another character that's kind of like doesn't get much chance in the movie, but I believe he loves dogs. He comes across.
I felt that when they were, you know, the thing was in there in the kennel or whatever, and then somebody shoots the dog, and then you get a real strong reaction for him where, you know, he's like, no, what are you doing or whatever. And yeah, he was like 100% in on the dogs. I liked that guy. Like we were, you know, it was easy to empathize with him. And then in the beginning, when they like bring the thing into the camp or whatever, and he goes up and licks the dude's face, clearly identifies him as the dog lover that the thing can manipulate, and goes up, licks his face or whatever. Yeah, he was awesome. I was on board with him entirely.
And of course, Kurt Russell, Keith David, kind of carry it a lot. Wilford Brimley is always good. He always plays Wilford Brimley. I don't feel it would be unfair for me to give this movie anything less than a 4. So we're going 4 on 4 on acting. Why not?
Cool.
All right, let's give 2011 their acting scores.
Yeah, for me, it again, like similar to earlier, what was our first category, the action, like I felt like it was similar. I felt like they did a good job. I really quite like Ramona Flowers.
She's great.
She's great. I thought she brought quite a bit of charisma and power to the role, you know, because it's really interesting. The original novella, Who Goes There, the main McCready, he is a overpowering character. Like he's painted by the author as being literally like this huge, I think he's like 6'4", 6'5" or something. Like he's huge and like and looks like bronze, like a statue. And they refer to him in all of this language that is like metallic and like inorganic and huge and powerful, and has this incredible sense of presence that's almost a little bit superhuman. And I think Kurt Russell captured a decent amount of that, like the cool factor, although he doesn't have the stature that the original character did. And I think that Mary Elizabeth Winstead captured a part of that as well, in terms of just the out and out charisma for a scientist that's going through and doing her whole deal.
You know as well as I do, there are too many variables.
Open your mouth. Open your mouth!
and you know, you got the easy to hate billionaire guy, and you've got the skeezy guys, and then you know the cool Norwegian dude. So I thought that the acting was generally good. I didn't have a similar sense of really feeling viscerally empathetic towards the characters in the same way that I did in the 1982 version, where like I really felt their terror, like it was palpable to me. That didn't really happen quite as much, and I'm sure a lot of the like this part also gets into some of the directing and everything else. Some of those shots with the camera, which really manipulates the viewer's emotional state and everything else. But because I didn't really feel them in the same way, like and that is kind of my bar with acting. I'm going to give them 1 star lower and give them a 3.
All right, man. I'm gonna have to disagree with you a little bit, just in the sense that, like, I don't think there was any bad acting in it. Obviously, Mary Elizabeth Winstead was great. Like we said, we both love Ramona Flowers and anything that she does. Joel Edgerton, really good, really believable for who he's supposed to be. The billionaire Ulrich Thompson does a fantastic job. That actor makes me hate him. And so when you were saying about there being something visceral, I viscerally hate the billionaire scientist. I'm like, kill him first, you know. And of course, my man, the wildling from Beyond the Wall, Tormund, dude, come on, man, he can do no wrong. After like all he has to do is be in a movie and still look like Tormund, and I love it. So I am, you know, but of course this isn't Goodfellas. You know, it would be absurd for me to shoot a 5 at this. So I'm gonna go with a 4, man. And now we are down to wow factor. And man, shit, dude. Tell me what you think. Wow factor 1982. This is a completely subjective category.
Wow. Is what I think about that. The fact that this has become a classic and kind of transcended, it kind of like, I can't actually think of a really visceral body horror kind of movie from before this. Like it kind of was breaking out into its own little subgenre, at least as far as popular culture goes, from what I know. It's and has lasted throughout this entire time. I had a profound visceral reaction to this movie, especially the first time I saw it, because I was much younger and was like horrified, and so uncomfortable, like the entire time, in a masochistic way that I really actually do kind of enjoy. It was fantastic in that sense. Like it really captured its moments incredibly well, I thought. Which is hard to do, especially because I really enjoyed the novella. Like that's kind of where my heart is in that. But I think it actually improved on it in a couple of respects. And it was great. It left a visceral impact, not a comfortable one. It was uncomfortable throughout the time. The whole thing had some cheesiness in various parts, but as far as like just being wowed, like jaw on the floor, you can't help but have a strong reaction to the movie. It was a 5 for me.
A 5. Oh my god, that's crazy, dude. This is where we are finally going to diverge. But I mean, because I feel like we've been really, really close. It's so similar on so much stuff with this. But shit, man, this is the way I've been thinking about it, and as I know that this movie was greenlit by Universal because of the success of Ridley Scott's Alien. They're like, oh, people do like a scary alien movie with a nihilistic ending, and you know, lone survivor, you know, or no survivor, you know, perhaps we don't know if anyone lives. That's how they end it. And then of course it failed so much in the theaters, and that could have been due to so many aspects. Could have just been the way people felt at the time, and people maybe just didn't want to be depressed in 82. I guess we're going through a lot. Also, there's the fact, you know, I don't know if you had heard some of this. I think John Carpenter brings it up himself. This is at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and that's a lot of like what's going on here is, you know, because that's when people didn't really know what AIDS was. It's a disease. It transfers person to person. A lot, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's inspiration even for this. Some of the way what the film.
Well, I mean,
but I think
it definitely wasn't. wasn't for the 1938 original short story, which was really almost exactly the same. So
Okay.
that's kind of an unfortunate parallel.
Well, I'm only saying it because John Carpenter said it. I
Right.
it didn't even dawn on me. But I mean, also I wasn't, there. But here's the problem for me, man, is that I immediately, when I found out this was greenlit by Universal, because they're like, hey, Alien was fucking the shit. Everyone loved it. You can do this. You can do it with not too much of a budget. Go ahead, go for it, John Carpenter. I felt that I was obligated to compare it to Alien for wow factor. Alien is a five stars wow factor movie. There's no doubt about it. If I'm comparing The Thing to Alien, it just can't come close to a 5-star rating. I actually felt like I had to give it a 3 on wow factor, because it doesn't blow me away in the way that Alien did. Alien blew me the fuck away. This was just cool. So
right, and I think that
I
think that is like the key for why it was a box office failure as well, is that it was set up to make that comparison. And this movie was not Alien at all. Like, it's not even really an action movie necessarily. Like, it is really a visceral, uncomfortable body horror film that is completely different in its own, like, and body horror is like a very bizarre and interesting subgenre with like writing and everything. Like, I've written a couple of stories that fall under that. I definitely have a little bit of a predilection to go in that zone. And I think that it captures that whole thing extraordinarily well. And so when I'm judging it as it's without that comparison to Alien, and like, because if you do try to put it in that frame, I definitely agree. Like, it does not fit at all, and I think that's why it flopped. And I think that was a really ridiculous move by Universal to draw some of those kind of comparisons. And I think that's where a lot of the people's opinions, especially early on, really stemmed from. And so, yeah, I totally see where you're coming from with that. And it is not Aliens or Alien or.
Well, see, that's the thing, is also Aliens. That is possibly, I mean, it is in my top 10 favorite films of all time. So that, once again, we're talking about wow factor. I just can't be giving away 5s, because part of that, I believe, is rewatchability. I watched the original movie Alien, who knows how many times. I've watched the movie Aliens just an absurd number of times. Because those are 5-star wow factors. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say, hey, this movie's cool,
right,
but it is the best I can give it is a 3 on wow factor.
Cool.
All right, man. Final scoring is wow factor on The Thing 2011.
Okay, so for me, it's kind of the inverse in terms of because and again, a lot of this does come down to taste as well. Like I really liked the kind of niche art value of the 82, and I enjoyed the 2011 version as a fun movie. Like, I thought that it was cool and a romp, and there were some parts in there that I really definitely enjoyed. And it was kind of interesting and fun to have a female horror antagonist or protagonist that's not like falling under some of the unfortunate tropes that genre has taken. She did a pretty good job of being the action hero and being in control of the situations, like that, like the scene that we mentioned with the Billings.
I was going to say, at no point during the film is she running down a hallway in high heels screaming. Right. Like, that fucking doesn't. And so good for them.
Yes,
good for the creators of this film.
Yeah, and she's very much in command. She's got a flamethrower, not afraid to use it, controlling all of these dudes and going through all that. And then you get the fun elements of having a protagonist to hate or an antagonist to hate, and doing that whole deal. So for me, it was a fun movie, but more forgettable than the 1982 version, which I also probably wouldn't rewatch very frequently.
Yeah.
But it's but yeah, I think, which is interesting too. I think that 2011 is probably more rewatchable than the 1982 version, just because the 82 is such an uncomfortable experience that I don't want to go live there.
Yeah.
Like it's good to have experienced that, but I don't want to really go back to it. And then the 2011, it's something that I could see having on in the background. And so, so yeah, so for me, I'm gonna definitely give it like a star down from the 1982 version. So I can go with a 4. Like I think it did what it was intending to do pretty well. Like it was a fun action romp and enjoyable in its own rights. But for me personally, didn't have the same lasting artistic impact where it really kind of changed the way that I view the world a little bit. Like the 1982 version, it kind of sets my bar for the uncomfortable, like revulsion, tension. Like that kind of is my high bar for that particular set of feelings. And the 2011 one, it doesn't really, it's fun and doesn't set any new bars for me. So that's where I'm coming down a star on it.
All right. So what you're throwing a 4 on?
Yeah,
a 4?
I can go
cool.
with a 4. I think it did what it was intended to do very well.
Well, man, I think I'm going to surprise you here.
Okay.
Because yes, rewatchability. I am far more likely to rewatch this one than I am the original, because yeah, especially it's something you can have on. You could like fuck around on your phone and watch this, and it could be on. You know, what this movie for me is, what I think of it as is if you had a cold and you were like sitting there and you had like a blanket and you're eating some soup, this is the perfect movie to put on and just watch it.
Soup movie.
Yeah, just let it take you away from your cold, man. Forget you have a cold for a little bit and be like, oh, you know, while you get better. It's a good just you know, it's a good movie for that. And like, you know, when we were talking about wow factors, well, you know, I had to give John Carpenter's The Thing a harsher rating because we're comparing it to Alien. I don't really have a one for one thing that I'm comparing this movie to, but the wow-ness of it, man, I think it's only fair for me to say that the wow factor is maybe a 2.
Really? Oh wow.
I'm not I don't love it.
We're getting real in the
I don't love it for wow, man. I love it because it's a romp, but it's not like a romp on the level of like, oh my God, I gotta watch this again, you know? So
yeah,
dude, all right, let's count this up. All right. Dude, were you keeping score too?
No, I wrote down my scores before we started, but I don't have your scores.
Well, anyway, man, I don't want to sit here and fucking add all this up because it's obvious John Carpenter won. But by a slim margin.
Yeah. No, as you said, I think when we were discussing it originally, you know, these are both movies that deserve to exist. You know, like they have their whole deal going, and and I don't regret having watched either of them. I'm a little scarred by John Carpenter's version, but in the good way that I actually seek out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar. I just really, I mean, I predicted this, is that when we got to the end of The Shining versus Dr. Sleep, they're complementary films. And I totally think with this, if you really, really liked The Thing and you're not just a stick in the mud about, you know, somebody trying something new with it, it's really cool to go see the Norwegian prequel. I think that's really where I land on it, man. They both deserve to exist. They're both cool movies. You know, they differ mainly just really in effects. One's CG and one's practical effects. So, and you know, one's a little more spookier and darker and, you know, quieter, and one's a little more
rompy.
All right, guys, you hear it here first. Fucking John Carpenter, The Thing, 1982, by a slim margin beats Matthijs, I can't pronounce your last names, 2011, The Thing.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon, man, thank you so much for joining me on this film analysis podcast. I'm glad that we have finally figured this out so no one else has to do it.
It's good to be back. Thanks for having me again.
You know how I knew you were human? When you showed it back at base?
No.
Your earring. It was your other ear.
Okay. What are you doing? Let's talk, Gus. Talk. Kate? Kate!